Hello everyone, I'm here with Tech Motorsports and got this BMW 330i behind me here, and it's here for a shifter upgrade. So we're going to end up installing a nice newer shifter. We're going to go ahead and keep the OEM actual brace itself, the bracket, but we'll replace everything else. So we've got a new Glebo to install as well, and the actual yoke for the shift rod on the transmission, and then the rest of the items. And we're also using the I forget the name of that bracket, but it's the shift rod with the Y at the end. So we'll be using that, which I'll show you here shortly. So yeah, let's get started. I've already torn the car pretty much apart, but let's go through just to show you what needs to be removed to make it a little bit easier, because you will need some room, especially with what we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. So let's look at the items that have been removed to access the actual shifter itself. Okay, so the first thing to remove the exhaust, of course. Once you get going to the exhaust, you got to get the heat shield removed, which is right there, and the drive shaft. And that'll just give you all the access you need. And also what I end up doing is dropping the transmission trans right there to give you more room to remove the shifter itself. So as you can see, the Glebo's already been removed, and I got my shift fork up there, and the actual portion up there on the transmission itself where the bracket goes to. Okay, so for the actual shifter itself, it's just the trim. You got to pull this thing off. Watch yourself that you don't hit your head trying to get it. And then these just have the clips on there, as you can see, and it just technically just pops right on out. So yeah, that's how I was able to get that one out. And then the actual rubber boot that's in there, you just gotta get that out. And what happens is once you do that, it drops from underneath the car itself. So let's take a look at the actual shifter itself. Alright guys, so here is the old stuff. You got the boot, the actual shifter, the shift rod, and the rod yoke, and then the pin. You have to retain the pin, you have to reuse it. The new yoke does not come with it. And then the oh, and here is the old rubber bushing for the actual bracket itself. So I already have a polyurethane one in. Here's a spare one, and then my two clips, and again here's the new yoke. So the shifter is already attached, is already installed. This is very straightforward. There's technically one way. You have the two plastic rings, and the plastic rings have to go in to the actual ball itself. You know, looks similar to this kind of, but and that's easy to do. And then you have your Allen head bolts, 3 on each side, to be able to get it in there. Now I was able to use a C-clamp to bite down on them, so I could get these in there nice and tight. So so this one is in there, it's already lubed up, and the ring is in. So this one is already done. But that's the easy part. The part it is that I'm doing this video on is the yoke itself. So if you're trying to do this underneath the car, and you keep the old yoke, you will have no problems whatsoever. She goes in like butter. All right, so if you're retaining the old one and you're not replacing it with a new one, you are good to go. Technically, you're not going to have any issues. You can do it underneath the car. Now if you replace it with a new one, this is where you're going to have a little bit of an issue. And here is the issue is, if you look at the new one, you can see that there is a plastic ring that's protruding on each side. Okay, that is going to be the issue, and the reason is because this one is completely smooth. All right, so when you put the fork on, the DSSR fork, that's where you're going to have an issue. So like I was doing it before, it goes in nice and smooth. All right, there is very little play, and that is on the old one. Now on the new one, she is, I mean, I was just pushing and it's not going on there. But what you're going to have Let me see if I could just, let me see if I could do this. All right, she's almost staying in place. The actual plastic piece is going to be in your way. Now you can go ahead and get this in, but if you go ahead and do that, you are going to spread out the actual fork itself here, which when you do that, you're not going to get a very good alignment here, and you're going to struggle, especially if you do this underneath the car. You're going to have issues. So what should be done is you should be able to grind this down. You have to grind it down to make it smooth, so that way the fork goes in there nice and smooth, because that is a big gap. Yes, the plastic will eventually kind of flatten, but by the time you do install it and you do it that way, what you're going to end up having is you're going to have a little bit of play, because these will flatten down, and now the forks are going to be just a tad bit spread. So yeah, so if you're doing this and you're replacing a new one, I would recommend shaving these down, so that way you have a nice smooth insertion, so it goes in nice and smooth if you're doing it underneath the car. So luckily for me, I'm rebuilding everything's here on the table. It made it a little bit easier, and really started looking at the reason why I did one not too long ago, and it was a pain in the butt underneath the car itself. So I was trying to assemble everything underneath the car, meanwhile I'm assembling everything here at the table. So yes, that's a nice little key point. So if you do replace it with a new one, like I was stating, you have to grind these down. You have to smooth it down, and you could do that with a file. That's easy to do. It's plastic. So and what you can do is just little by little until you get it to go nice and smooth, so that way you do get it still a tight fit. So yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, get this going, and get ready, hopefully have everything all set up and ready to install and put back in the car. All right, so now I'm just going to take it and shoot. Might have to take this ring off just so I can put it on there flat. Yeah, there we go. This will work. Now when you do this, you want to do both sides, not just one side. And there we go. Now it looks like I need just a little bit more up top, but there we go. Okay, so I got the rod connected, and just got a dummy bolt in here just to kind of hold the actual rod yoke on there. And I was just going through everything, make sure everything's good. Also, when you are installing the actual shifter itself and you put it assemble, please do not forget to add the torque lock, the Loctite, I'm sorry, to the actual little Allen head bolts. So you have 6 of them that you have to end up doing, 3 on each side, and that keeps this the actual shifter in place. So yeah, so now just gonna throw it back in the car. All right, guys, so here we go. The DSSR is installed with a new shifter and back in place with the new glebo. So let's see if I can get to that pin up there, all the way up top, which is actually what the bracket sits onto. That's a pain in the butt to install and to actually align it perfectly to the hole, to be able to put the pin through it, because it's the polyurethane bushing that replaces that rubber one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I did it. I will do that on the bench, so give me a few minutes and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so let's go over one small thing. On an earlier clip, you end up seeing me file down the new yoke, and as I was underneath the car installing the shifter, I realized why. So if you're replacing this from just this yoke without replacing anything with the shifter or doing any upgrades, what it ends up being, or I assuming it is, the new one comes with built-in washers, which will replace the single ones that you have on the OEM one. So I think that's what that is. So on the earlier clip, you saw me file this down, and what I was doing was filing down the little plastic washer that I was showing you earlier, this one right here. So what you end up doing is you grab the new one and you technically make it look like this, which you'll end up filing this down. So you won't need these anymore. You file the new one down and she'll go into the rod just like that, just smooth like butter. So with that set aside, that taken care of, now let's move on to the actual installation of the actual shift forks and the shift fork, the actual bracket itself and all that. So what makes it difficult is going to be this one here. Maybe not so much when it's the rubber piece, but when you go and replace the rubber with the polyurethane bushing, that's where it gets difficult. So this is what I had to do when I installed the polyurethane bushing on the actual bracket itself. Was it's a very tight fit that's going to go in the transmission itself on those on the aluminum section. So this is where that pin goes. On this transmission, there's only one pin. So to get this in place, you have, you get it into the chassis, you get this piece on there, and you have that here, and you got your new polyurethane bushing. So technically what I ended up doing was the transmission is completely hanging down. So what I ended up doing was I put a socket between the upper section of the actual bracket and the tunnel itself. And what I ended up doing is I got it close enough, and I got an adjustable wrench, and I put it right here so that I'm able to keep it straight as possible. And then what I ended up doing is I jacked up the transmission ever so slightly until the actual bushing slipped into the actual slot itself. Now once that was said and done, I still needed this in place, so I kept taking it off and on, and that's where it comes even harder, is trying to look at the actual hole itself to make sure that your pin goes through the actual bracket and the polyurethane bushing. So what I ended up doing was I have a pick. This is a thicker one, so I could kind of maneuver it forward, mainly more backwards. And what I ended up doing underneath to get it to go forward was I had to put a little pry bar here on the back end and tap it with a hammer so I can move it forward, and then this pick is what I technically end up using to move it back. And then of course, if I needed to go down, like I stated, I put the socket here between the chassis, and then I jacked up on it. And if I needed to lower it or raise this back up, you could actually put a pry bar in between it and then kind of pry it up. So what once you get all that set, you still have to align the hole. I'm looking for that. Here it is. You still have to align this through the actual aluminum section on the transmission, and that's the hard part, and this is where you're going to need a mirror. Not a cracked mirror like this, and one probably newer one that you could see because it was a little bit tougher, but you'll be able to see when you get really close to getting the holes lined up. You're not going to be able just to move it around. It is going to take a little force to get the fork to move in the right spot. So what I ended up doing was I got a screw that was a little bit more that's not as thick as this, just to get me in the right realm. Once I got really close, this, which is the bolt for the actual drive shaft itself on the back section where the diff is, I used this to help me finalize the alignment. And what I ended up doing was getting it in place and getting it to thread in. And then once it started threaded in, it went straight through. And then I just had to do a little bit of adjustment, which is it's just a small amount to get this to go in straight. So that way both hoses on each side were aligned. And once I got this through and I was able to thread the bolt out, then my pin slid in. And that was it. That technically is just a pain in the butt, but if you do those steps, it will help you out or make things easier. So yeah, so everything is all back in. So the next thing I'm going to end up doing is just putting everything all back together, and then she's done. So at this point, that'll be the end of this video. I want to appreciate you guys for watching. Like always, like and subscribe, and hope to see you in the next video.